This is the story of the Irish language, a language that has been shaped by its turbulent history in so many ways, which gives us a lot of interesting things for exploration. Today, we'll explore the story of this unique and fascinating language that, despite the numerous challenges that it has faced, remains a living language today. The story of Irish begins with the arrival of the Celts to Ireland around 2500 years ago. The Celts brought an early form of Irish language to Ireland, from which the Irish language that we know today was born. Irish is one of the oldest written and historical languages in the world, and the Ogham alphabet proves that. The Ogham alphabet is the earliest known form of writing in Ireland. The Ogham alphabet was used to write the primitive Irish language and later the Old Irish. It is generally thought that the earliest inscriptions in Ogham date to about the 4th century AD. What's interesting is that the characters are named after various trees and shrubs. For example, the letter A is called Alim, which means fir tree, while B is called Be, which means birch tree. This reflects the connection between Ogham and the natural world. There are two main schools of thought among scholars that explain the reason why Ogham was created. The first one is that Ogham was created as a secret alphabet that would allow the Irish to communicate with each other without being understood by those with the knowledge of the Latin alphabet. And those with the knowledge of the Latin alphabet were, of course, the Romans, which then ruled over neighboring southern Britain. It is asserted that the alphabet was created by Irish scholars or druids for political, military, or religious reasons, to provide a secret means of communication in opposition to the authorities of Roman Britain. The possibility of an invasion to Ireland was a real threat back then, which may have been the motivation for the creation of the alphabet. The second school of thought is that Ogham was created by the first Christian communities in Ireland, because apparently the sounds of primitive Irish were difficult to transcribe in the Latin alphabet, so they decided to create a unique alphabet that they could use. For me personally, mythological stories about the creation of Ogham are more interesting. According to Irish mythology and legend, the creation of the Ogham alphabet is attributed to the legendary figure Ogma. Ogma is depicted as a god of eloquence, poetry, and learning in Celtic mythology, while there are variations in the myths and legends surrounding the creation of Ogham. One common narrative suggests that Ogma invented the script as a means of communication for the learned elite or druids. The story goes that Ogma was inspired by observing the lines and notches on sticks and trees made by the ancient Celts for counting and keeping track of information. It is said that the first message written in Ogham was a warning to Lug, a god of light and skill, in which Ogma warns Lug about the possibility of his wife, Etain, being carried away to the otherworld 7 times. The otherworld in Irish mythology is often described as a land of enchantment inhabited by gods, spirits, and other supernatural beings, while typically being portrayed as a realm of supernatural beauty, eternal youth, and abundance. It is also a place of mystery and danger, especially for mortals, such as Etain. The captivating beauty of Etain caught the eye of Midir, another powerful figure in Irish mythology. Through various means, including magic, Midir managed to separate Etain from Lug and take her to the otherworld, known as Tir na Nog. Lug, with unbreakable loyalty and love for Etain, embarks on a journey to the unknown, to rescue his beloved from the clutches of darkness. As Lug sets out to his quest, he embarks on a solitary journey through the mystical landscapes of ancient Ireland. His path takes him through dense forests, across rushing rivers, and over rugged mountains, each step bringing him closer to his goal. Guided by the words of Ogma's warning and the promise of the birch's protection, Lug's heart burns with determination and love for Etain. He faces numerous obstacles along the way, including encounters with magical beings, treacherous terrain, and tests of his courage and resolve. As Lug draws nearer to the fortress where Etain is held captive, the weight of destiny hangs heavy upon his shoulders. With each passing moment, the stakes grow higher, and the need to rescue Etain becomes more urgent. Through sheer bravery and unwavering determination, Lug emerges victorious, rescuing Etain from the clutches of Midir and the otherworld. Together, they emerge from the darkness, their love stronger than ever, and their bond forged anew by the trials they have faced. For this reason, the letter B is said to be named after the birch, and the Book of Ogham goes on to tell the tradition that all letters were named after trees. No matter how Ogham was created, it's an integral part of the history of the Irish language. Ogham inscriptions are found primarily in the south of Ireland, as well as in Wales, Devon, and Cornwall, where it was brought by settlers from Ireland to sub-Roman Britain, and in the Isle of Man. In the 5th century, the arrival of Christianity to Ireland brought Latin with it, which had a great influence on the Irish language, especially on its writing system. The OM alphabet started being replaced by the Latin alphabet for writing in Irish. It was adapted to suit the phonetic needs of the Irish language, resulting in what is known as the Insular or Gaelic script. Christianity also had a significant role in the development of literacy in Ireland. Irish monasteries were centers of education back then and served as places for the preservation and transmission of knowledge, where monks studied and taught various subjects including language, literature, history, and theology. Monks tirelessly worked on writing and transcribing manuscripts, ancient tales, religious texts, and such, which was key to the conservation of this cultural treasure. The Vikings, also known as Norse seafarers, began raiding Ireland towards the end of the 8th century. They mostly targeted monasteries because they were easy targets due to the lack of protection, and of course they were rich in treasures that were of the utmost interest to the Vikings. Later though, the Vikings started settling in Ireland and founded and renamed several settlements in Ireland. Their presence and interactions with the people of Ireland had its influence on the Irish language. In fact, there are quite a few places with names bestowed by the Vikings, the most famous one being, of course, Dublin, which came from Old Norse meaning black pool, as well as Cork and Weatherford, which also came from Old Norse. Moreover, many words related to seafaring, trade and warfare, such as long, ship, port, harbour, sleigh, spear and gata, street, originated from Old Norse. By the 10th century, Old Irish had evolved into Middle Irish, which was spoken not only in Ireland, but in a part of Scotland and in the Isle of Man as well. This form of the language was contemporary of the late Old English and early Middle English. Middle Irish was the tool used for bringing to life a large amount of Irish literature, mainly the entire Ulster cycle, a body of medieval Irish heroic legends and sagas. In the 12th century another arrival happened, the arrival of the Anglo-Normans, which meant another influence on the language. Even though the Anglo-Normans brought their customs, language and legal systems, changing the political and social landscape of Ireland significantly, a lot of them eventually assimilated into Irish culture and began speaking Irish. It is said that they became more Irish than the Irish themselves. With that said, the Anglo-Norman influence on the Irish language was evident and could be seen in form of introduction of words like justice, corporation, court, boy and many more. Between the year 1200 to the year 1600 was when modern classical Irish was born. This was a standardized version of the language, developed by educated native speakers with the intent of teaching it to student bards, monks, lawyers, doctors, administrators, and so on. Its literary form, Classical Gaelic, was used by writers in both Ireland and Scotland until the 18th century. Over time, writers gradually shifted to writing in the vernacular dialects: Ulster Irish, Connacht Irish, Munster Irish, and Scottish Gaelic, even though the Anglo-Normans had conquered parts of Ireland, bringing it under English rule. As mentioned before, a lot of them assimilated into Irish society, and by the 14th century the effective area of English rule had significantly reduced, so most of Ireland was held by native Gaelic chiefdom. Not to say that they didn't try to kill the Irish identity by outlawing many social practices such as intermarriage, use of the Irish language and Irish dress, but eventually a lack of interest from the London government met with a handful of turbulent events such as Irish Rebellion, Scottish Invasion and Black Death resulted in adaptation of Irish language and culture by some of the Anglo-Norman aristocrats, but then the Tudor monarchy set their foot on the island with great determination to bring the Irish under English authority, this time for real. The conquest began in 1536 and on 18 June 1540, Henry VIII of England was made King of Ireland by the Crown of Ireland Act 1542. They went about this by employing a few different strategies, which consisted of assimilation of the Gaelic nobility by way of surrender and regrant, confiscation and colonization of lands with settlers from Britain, imposing English law and language, dissolving the monasteries and making Anglican Protestantism the state religion. The assimilation of the Gaelic nobility often required them to adopt English customs and language, resulting in a discontinuation of the use of the Irish language among the upper classes. The confiscation and colonization of lands with English settlers meant replacing the Irish language and culture with English customs and language. The Tudors imposed English law and language in Ireland, so legal and official documents were in English, and English was the language of the courts and administration, making it the language of power and prestige. This left a big scar on the Irish language. A decline in the use of the Irish language and the rise in the use of English was evident. But not all hope was lost. Despite the significant challenges posed by the Tudor conquest, the Irish language managed to survive. The English influence was not as strong in the rural western parts of Ireland, so these areas served as a refuge for the Irish language. The poor people from the west were the main guardians of the language, keeping it alive despite all the attacks towards it. The penal laws were a group of discriminatory laws toward Catholics in Ireland, imposed by the British government. The laws included the Education Act, the Banishment Act, the Registration Act, the Popery Acts, and the Disenfranchising Act. Under these laws, Catholics were deprived of their rights by banning mixed marriages, excluding them from holding any positions in public offices, forbidding them to possess firearms, excluding them from voting, and banning them from teaching in schools. Also, people were fined for not going to a Protestant church. Amongst all these prohibitions and many more, Catholics could also not speak or read Gaelic or play Irish music. This tyranny drained many Irish people, both physically and psychologically, so a lot of them decided to leave their homeland in search of a better life. But those that stayed found themselves unified under a newfound wave of Irish nationalism. Eventually, the penal laws were abolished, but that didn't put an end to the problems. Upon the ending of the penal laws, Britain started financing education in Ireland. And why was that a problem, you may ask? Well, within that education system, the Irish language was prohibited until 1871, because the purpose of the system was to help with the Anglicization of Ireland. The response was the formation of so-called hedge schools, where Irish culture, history and the language were taught. Actually, these schools outnumbered national schools by a lot. These efforts to maintain the Irish language for sure is one of the reasons why Irish is still being used today. But the end of all the horrors could not be seen. One of the most devastating events in the Irish history was at the door, ready to further damage Irish society and its cultural heritage: the Great Famine. The Great Famine was a period of starvation and disease in Ireland, lasting from 1845 to 1852, which had a major impact on Irish society and history as a whole. The Irish language was affected as well by this tragedy. The Great Famine, caused by potato blight, disproportionately hit the poor, who were speakers of Irish. Hedge schools, founded in the areas which were hit hard by the famine, were also very much affected. During this period, around 1 million people died, and more than 1 million left the country to escape the horrors happening in their homeland. Having fled the country, most of them stopped using Irish, as it was not needed in their new countries. Between 1845 and 1855, at least 2.1 million people left Ireland, primarily on package ships, but also on steamboats and barks, one of the greatest exoduses from a single island in history. All of this caused a huge decline of Irish language, as the areas heavily affected by the Great Famine were the western and southern part of Ireland, where the Irish language was dominant. The Irish-speaking population shrank considerably. This period was one of the worst periods for Ireland as a whole, and certainly for the Irish language. The introduction of the national school system, which prohibited Irish in schools, death of so many people, mainly Irish-speaking, and huge immigrations, had enormous consequences on Ireland and its language. But better days for the Irish language were to come. On January 17, 1860, in Castlereagh, County Roscommon in Ireland, the first Irish president and a co-founder of the Gaelic League was born. His name was Douglas Hyde, a man who, led by the love for the language, dedicated himself to its revival. As a kid, he used to mix with the local people in cottages, which fueled his love for the language. Seamus Hart, a local gamekeeper, was the person who sparked his love for Irish by sharing stories, songs and proverbs with young Hyde. The interesting thing is that Hyde kept a journal where he documented his first steps of learning Irish, as well as some of his adventures growing up in Roscommon. He was 14 when he started documenting his journey. One of the stories from his journal is that he went to Kirshcorn and wanted to speak Irish to the locals. To do that, he had to pretend that he was Catholic. He was actually a Protestant, the son of a pastor, and was ironically of English descent, and that he couldn't speak English, so he went to a pub, chatted to the locals while having a few drinks, and came back home, exhausted. But it was worth it, as he really enjoyed his day. When he was 16, Seamus Hart, his mentor and friend, died. He was heartbroken. He wrote in his diary, "I can't see no one from now on with whom I can enjoy friendship as I enjoyed with you. In 1880, he joined the Society for the Preservation of the Irish Language and began to publish his own poems as well as translations, songs and ballads. Hyde was very passionate about keeping the Irish language alive, not because there was this beautiful language that the Irish should speak for the sake of it, but because he thought that the Irishness couldn't exist without the language. In other words, all its memories, all its meanings, the culture intertwined with the language could be gone if something was not to be done. With the help of Douglas Hyde, the Gaelic Journal was established in 1892. In November of the same year, he wrote a manifesto called The Necessity for the Anglicizing Ireland, stating that Ireland should follow its own tradition in language, literature and dress. Alongside that, he also wrote an essay, a plea for the Irish language. Besides the Fires, a collection of Irish Gaelic folk stories, and a collection of Irish folk tales. His pen name was Delightful Little Branch. In 1893, he helped found the Gaelic League to encourage the preservation of Irish culture, music, dance and language. The league became politicized through the involvement of some of its members who formed part of a new generation of Irish Republicans. One of the members that had a different vision to Hyde's was Patrick Pearse, one of the leaders in the Easter Rising in 1916. In his speech, The Coming Revolution, Pearse said, "Whenever Dr. Hyde, at a meeting at which I have had a chance of speaking after him, has produced his dole of peace, I have always been careful to produce my sword, and to tantalize him by saying that the Gaelic League has brought to Ireland not peace, but a sword." Hyde didn't like what was happening with the League, or in his own words, "Never for as long as the Gaelic League holds together, and I find myself on a platform like this, should the poor light of the Irish language be trailed in the dust of anyone, faction or party, or of politics at all." He went on to lose the vote, and at once resigned from the League in 1915. Douglas Hyde thought that the involvement in the Easter Rising of some of the members of the League had compromised its work, and wrote, "The League has been steered onto the rocks by fools." Hyde was inaugurated as the first president of Ireland on 26 June 1938. The interesting thing is that he recited the Presidential Declaration of Office in Irish, more precisely in Roscommon Irish, a dialect of which Hyde was one of the last speakers. Despite its ups and downs, the Gaelic League has been very important for the preservation and revival of the language. They had branches all over the country, and encourage the Irish people to learn their language and engage with their culture by organizing language, dance and traditional music classes around Ireland. The League is widely responsible for bringing Irish back into public life. Upon independence from Britain, Irish was adopted as national language in 1922, but it was not until 2003 that the Official Language Act was signed, declaring it as an official language and requiring public service providers to make services provided in the language. Today, Irish is an official language of Ireland alongside English, and an official language of the European Union as well. In today's school system of Ireland, Irish is taught as a heritage language, and there are also Gael schools which teach all the subjects through Irish. In the latest Irish census of 2022, 1,873,997 people, or 39.8% of the population of the Republic of Ireland, claimed some ability to speak Irish, but only about 72,000 people use it daily. It is estimated that there are between 40 and 80,000 native Irish speakers today in Ireland. This is what Irish of the last monolingual Irish speaker sounded like.
Nishadurton Reelish, that we Brona Bigger, where Mission Tachas hard togum with the Dutra. For the Dutch sheets in the stop, Martin of the Taj. Hookshalish Tacha Barry in the stop, the Scotians was the Mashgiftary. Wool Shambo her more, this in Shula vi Shayamu, vi Shatyak Suas Shalivi Rudder, with a Livini near Shatyak Suaslish. Jagra Junagus Jamu Latia, Wool Martin of Imla Cram, with a Shakamutave de la Mihosu. Ach, we find a community beige, we had a Hennigan screw, Yariga sage of Padun. August love with a pony, Charta 2 years do the pony. Tamageri bought on one day to Martin, who's getting to long home. Near on Foculus of Ale, where we bought his gave. Stapal Martin or Stachari.
Even though Irish has lived through so many terrible moments, which has left it with visible scars, one of them being that it is still a minority language in Ireland today, one thing is certain, it's still alive, and if there is life, there is hope. Who knows, maybe one day Irish will dethrone English from the throne of the most spoken language in Ireland and reclaim its place as the main language in the lives of Irish people. And until then, it will continue to live on through people who are interested in getting to know this beautiful language and its rich history. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, a like would be greatly appreciated. And if you would like to see more videos like this about other languages, consider subscribing to the channel. I hope to see you in the next one.